Hey there, I'm Paul Muller, host of the AI Forecast, Data and AI in the Cloud Era, a weekly podcast proudly sponsored by Cloudera that explores the past, present and future of data and AI in the enterprise. This is another instalment in a series of recordings we made in New York City at Cloudera's Evolve 24 event, a great event which brought together some of the brightest minds in data and AI to look at the latest innovations, success stories and what's to come. Now for this week's episode. When you think about the creation and consumption of data, there's, the typical industries. We think about finance, we think about telco, but the other one that probably many of us don't think about is the travel industry. This is an industry that generates and consumes tremendous amount of data, whether it's booking your flight, trying to find the best price, whatever it might be. A lot's going on. And heaven help us if one of those flights gets cancelled. There's a ripple effect that's probably hard to imagine. To help us get some insight into what's happening in the world of big data and AI in the travel industry, I'm joined by Imtiaz Ali, who's the head of big data delivery at Travelport. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. We are going to jump into the topic of big data and AI in travel in a minute. But before we do that, we have something we call the Fast Four. Ready to play the game?
Sure.
Let's do this thing. All right, first question. What would people who know you best, say is your superpower?
Understanding data.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Because the travel industry, the data comes from a variety of sources, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Understanding the data is important to really build the analytics on top of it.
Next question. The most impactful technology of all time?
From the time where I looked at big data, right, until today, I think the big data technology has transformed. But underneath it all is the concept that you can actually process lots of data today that was not imaginable in the past.
When we think about AI, we think about automating, processes. I'm curious, for you personally, what's one thing where AI and automation you'd love to see it in your life? It can be anything.
Well, my wife's a piano teacher, right? And every time we drive, she says, somebody's schedule has changed. Mm-hmm. So she talks to Siri all the time. And I tell her, hey, Janet, you're talking to Siri, you're training a model. And she says, yeah, but it never understands what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. But it's slowly getting there. And she can say, hey, Siri, change my schedule. I see this as a real application today, right? Okay. It's transforming people.
I love that.
And I think it's going to transform a whole lot more.
Similarly, but inverse, and I think, Ray Wang, who we heard from, I think reinforced this idea. There are places where you always want the human in the loop. What's one area where you would always want to see a human in the loop with AI for you?
Because I think if you're trying to build agents, and robots that actually assume travel, and that's where most people are going today, you do need the checks and balances, right? Because there's a lot of privacy and guardrails you need to put. So at the end of the day, agent would need to actually correct and learn that model, right? Tell the model, hey, this is a little bit of a privacy question. Right.
Got it. Okay.
Correct, yes.
All right, so for the governance side.
For the governance side.
That's a really good observation.
Yes.
Last question for you in the Fast Four is, I know from my own experience as an executive that subconsciously I'd picked up sort of tricks and traps when it came to how I dealt personally with data, how I look at data and think about data. I've said this before on the podcast, I'm a really big triangulation guy. You never give me one piece of data. I always want a couple of others to triangulate and verify. What have you learned about data? What's a trick or a trap that you teach people to look for or avoid?
I think you always have to cross-check the data, right? Sometimes you may build models that may be totally wrong. So you need to basically, it goes back to, in a football analogy, the blocking and tackling. You just need to test and test and test, right? In all situations, because at least in any situation, whether it be airline or any other challenge you have, there are multiple ways that a problem can be seen and looked at, right? So the triangulation would be, hey, let's the system do something that it was not supposed to do, right? And test it. Yes.
Jumping into the topic of big data and analytics in the airlines, maybe it's just worth sharing for the audience a bit about your background and how you came to be where you are.
Yeah.
Because you're actually a long-time data kind of guy, aren't you?
Yes,
all the way back to your PhD days.
Yeah, they say PhD, but I'm just a hard worker. They use the term push hard dummy, but I took my times. But I come from the world of OR, right? Operations research and the optimization of models, right? So back in those days, it was linear programming and cost optimization, hugely used in the airline industry today. Overbooking is a term today that was invented long ago. It's a simply OR model, right, of constraints, right? So coming back to my history, that we always have to look at the optimization piece. And today in the meetings I heard about, what are you trying to drive at, right? Is it cost or efficiency? Where are you going to get the efficiency from? So no matter what you do, at least in the area of AI or data science, you need to focus on understanding where you're going to get the efficiency. And the flywheel, as you said, right? Drive it so that you can build it. I'm not saying all companies are there today to do all the flywheel. We are still in a very preliminary stage today.
When we think about the airline industry, for those people maybe who aren't familiar with it, maybe give us a sense of what are the sources of data, the types of data you get, and maybe even what sort of volumes. I don't know how much information you can share without upsetting the boss, but what sort of data are we talking about?
We're talking with large data volumes, right? Lots of flight data.
And what sort of data?
It's data that basically comes in all kinds of forms, right? You can get XML kind of data. You can get JSON kind of data. You can get data that is not even readable sometimes, machine readable, and you'll have to basically convert it.
What's an example of that?
An example would be, old systems, and some of them are very archaic, and you'll have to convert them to something that you can understand, right? Yeah. So most of the challenges, of course, is the mapping part, right? Mapping, and once you call it data wrangling or whatever, once you get it in a format that everybody can understand, right? You're halfway there, or at least 3/4 of the way there.
So what are the sources of this data in your world typically? Give some examples maybe people would understand.
It could come from our competitors. It could come from, large IBM systems. Yes.
And maybe I should ask the question, and my apologies, I should have asked this earlier. Tell us a bit about Travelport and what they do.
So Travelport is a booking company, right? So basically it allows you to bring data in from various, whether it's internal or external data, and it allows you to price and optimize that data so that, we get the best prices for a booking, right? So essentially that's what it is.
And so a lot of that is real time, I'm guessing.
It's very real time. And today the real time is even, the pressure on real times, it's even getting more and more. Right?
All right, so let's talk then about, because you've been working with Cloudera for many years, from what I understand.
Yes, I originally was a Hortonworks customer. Travelport was a Hortonworks customer, and then we progressed to do Cloudera. Right?
Got it. So going all the way back to, I guess, what called original old school Hadoop.
Hadoop, yes, exactly.
And now, if we move forward, you're talking about a lot of real-time data. I guess we're talking about streaming data.
Streaming data.
And when people think about things like Hadoop, they don't really think streaming, do they?
They don't. Yes,
but so tell us a little bit about what your experience has been with
streaming.
streaming.
So streaming is all today. If you look at the presentations today, you saw streaming. A lot is happening today on Kafka, right? And Kafka is open source, right? So a lot of the data gets through Kafka. And what we do is, we were an old company in the Hortonworks world. We used to use a process called Storm. It's a tech stack that processes it. Now with Flink, you have better control of the data, and the data basically goes to many subsystems, right? And it may go to Splunk, for example, or it may go to any other systems, right? And these systems also cause they need to process something too. So the concept is called back pressures, right? So you see the back pressures coming. Your system is running fine, but somebody else is causing your back pressure, right?
An impedance mismatch.
Yeah, impedance mismatch. So you need monitoring systems that says, hey, that thing is slowing you down, right? So that's what actually Flink does, right? So it's just a Apache Flink or Cloudera Flink is what it is. And of course, right, Cloudera has many mechanisms on Kafka. And one of the other tools we use is called Nifi, which you must have heard today.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about Nifi. I'm not that familiar with it.
So Nifi is open source software, right? But Cloudera has improved on it. And it takes essentially data from one source and puts it into the other, right? Yeah, and it's very good at doing that. Right, and you can use Nifi workloads for batch systems or real-time systems. And at the end of the day, you got to visualize that data, right? So one of the big challenges everybody has is how do you visualize that data in sub-seconds or spin it up and look at different ways of looking at the data, right? So the challenges there today, we have a lot of companies building UIs, and we are trying to push innovations on that side to visualize that data very quickly.
In terms of, well, actually, before I ask the question I was going to ask, I'll ask a different one. One of the things that I've been hearing a lot about, and we've been talking a lot about on the podcast, has been this notion of cloud, on-prem versus off-prem. And I've said this before, but it almost seems to be like a religious war, right? You're either the on-prem guys or you're the off-prem cloud guys. And I guess my question is, where do you sit at Travelport, and what's your philosophy on versus off, or maybe both?
Well, it's the traditional thing, right? If you're running a workload on and on at a particular schedule, right? And most of these jobs today are heavy ETL jobs, and they're on a regular schedule. They just run 24 hours a day, right? Those are the ones that are actually good for on-prem, right?
Because of cost or some other reason?
Because of reliability, cost, it is because you have power at the data center, right? But if you want to burst out and do some quick analysis, the cloud's good for that, And today it's similar to what everybody does. It takes the data, pushes it to the cloud, and does some analysis on it, and comes back with the feedback into the data center.
So if you were advising someone who said, look, should I go cloud or on-prem, what would you say to them?
I would say, depending on your use case, workload, right? You'll have to choose choose if some things are regularly running and you have the capacity in the data center, you got to optimally use it, right? There are some things that, in terms of data governance, that's the other challenge you have, right? There's a lot of security in airlines applications, right? You would want that data to be basically in the data center cleaned up before you send it anywhere else because of security reasons.
Yeah. So this notion of like the true hybrid cloud that the Cloudera team have been talking about, that resonates with you?
It resonates with me.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. As you're thinking about the future, and I guess we talk a lot about the future at the moment, there seems to be, you wake up every morning and there's 10 new companies doing something new. What are you thinking about? What are your priorities? And I'm not necessarily saying Travelport's priorities, but maybe even yours as you think about, how do I ingest all of this new technology? What are some of your priorities in terms of what you're thinking about?
On the same lines, I would say sentiment analysis, right? Cognitive analysis, right? Basically, the challenges of any organization is how efficiently can you use your existing resources. You cannot always buy hardware all the time. You're going to kill every budget, right? So optimizing these resources, right? Whether it's in the cloud, in the on-premise, or in the cloud, and optimizing these to your advantage is always good for any company, right? So that's one of the areas. And on the future, right, where you would see a lake house, right, where you put everything together, right? The open format for Iceberg looks
like
very, very appealing, right? Yeah. Very, very appealing. But you still got to fight the latency battle, right? How fast is it, right? Traditionally, systems that old school Cloudera systems that came from Hive, right? Now we're going to Impala, right? They're going through this journey, right? And people want that data faster and faster, right? Right. So optimizing those resources is important. Guardrailing those resources is important. You don't want somebody today to run a SQL that will just kill the system either, right? So those still challenges exist today, right? And we need to kind of solve them very, very quickly. The containerization, like I would say in the future, right? We need containerization on premise, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that I always talk with Cloudera. It's like, hey, how do I get that, right? Because that's where you'll see efficiencies, right? Because people are building the same container. I always joke, you're becoming a container store, right? So you build a container only once, right, and use it as much as possible, right? So it's amazing that every company comes up with, from a Red Hat to any company, just build the container. Let's all use it and be one.
It's interesting listening to you. It's the management, operations, and governance, things like preventing people running runaway queries. That's where the hard stuff is. The technology is kind of largely there for the actual analytics and the data management. A lot of the open standards do that. It's all of the things you put around it. Is that a fair assessment?
It's a fair assessment.
Interesting. Okay, so and I think for me personally, I'm obviously not a data delivery manager. I've just always assumed that the problem was the technology foundation, not the things around it. But it sounds like I've been.
It's like you got to get up in the morning and just say, I got so many clusters, right?
Yeah.
Tell me which cluster needs more resources. It's a very difficult question even today to answer.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's hard. Whether you have Yarn to manage the resources, Yarn is yet another resource manager, right? So I wish that at some point you could get up in the morning, and I know about observability exactly.
That's a big trend at the moment, isn't it?
Trend in the moment to observe where we are going, right, and. I think all of this should come together. I think Cloudera is promising that. And I think they are delivering on my side. Like I have challenges today on how to run Nifi efficiently, right? And Nifi is a great tool. It is a good marriage of Kafka, right? Kafka is becoming a mainstay today, right? We use SMM. We use all the bells and whistles today when we want to mirror something. Off we go. It's good. You don't need a large IT staff to do things on Kafka, right? So it's going there. But managing resources is always still a challenge, right? It is, we're getting there, but we're not still there as yet.
Yeah, well, you know what? Thank goodness for problems in some respect, or you and I would be out of a job. Look, on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast, and special thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Please feel free to reach out to Cloudera on social media, at Cloudera on LinkedIn, with any questions for our guests or feedback for future episodes. We'll see you next week.